Hey everyone, in this video we're going to finish chapter 27 from book 5 of Caesar's De Bello Gallico. Now, if you remember, at this point in the narrative, we already have Ambiorix showing up, and he's specifically targeting the fort that the Romans have under Sabinus and Cotta, which is right near the border with Germany. He's already gone there. He's trying to trick them. Remember, they've had an attack. The attack was thwarted by the Romans, and now Ambiorix has shown up and he's been speaking, right? So this whole thing is a continuation. It's all an indirect statement where Caesar is reporting the speech of Ambiorix. And the indirect statement part makes this chapter very difficult usually for students looking at it, just because all of it is indirect statement, right? It's one big report. So you want to remember that at this point, the Romans have sent out 2 envoys. One of them, by the way, Caesar very interestingly makes a point of saying is a friend of Sabinus, right? And you want to keep noticing whenever Caesar mentions him by name, it's a way of sort of getting rid of the blame. And they've been treating with Ambiorix, right? He's telling him all these excuses about why he attacked and how much he loves Caesar, all these different things. So that's where we're going to pick up the narrative now. So the first part continues like this. You have quibus quoniam pro pietate satisfeceret, habere nunc se rationem offici pro beneficiis Caesaris, monere orare titurium pro hospitio ut suae ac militum saluti consulat. Okay? So you start with the quibus there, right? For these, right? So again, it's all sort of an indirect statement here. So the quibus there, you want to remember, is really like them is kind of what it means, right? Eis is sort of another alternative for it. So it's saying since he had satisfied or done enough for them, meaning the other Gauls, out of devotion, right? Pro pietate, right? Is kind of one way to do it, out of devotion. He said that now he had, right, habere, going with say, right, now he had rationem, and some commentaries will tell you to translate this as regard, right? So now he had a regard for duty, or a regard of duty, right, offici there, for duty, on account of the kindnesses of Caesar, pro beneficiis Caesaris, right? So it's almost like he's saying, I had to do what I did to satisfy the Gauls, but now that this has already happened, I really want to make sure that I'm, keeping a regard for my duty to Caesar, who I really like. Again, he's lying to everyone. I'm trying to trick him, but you want to notice that he's, he's saying that I'm doing it for my love of Caesar, right? For all the kindnesses of Caesar. So it continues, and you have the monere and orare there. Remember, it's indirect statement. So he's saying he said that he warned, right, monere, and he begged Titurius. Now, Titurius is Sabinus, right, another name for him. He begged him on account of hospitio, right, hospitality, you might say. And then you have the indirect command because of the warning and the begging, right? He begged him that he consulat, he consider, meaning Sabinus consider, the safety, his own safety rather, right? Suae, right? His own safety and the safety of his soldiers. So he's telling him, I'm warning you because I really, feel this duty to Caesar because he's been so kind to me. I felt it was my duty and out of hospitality to warn Sabinus of what's going on. So he claims that he's warning the Romans in the fort, okay? Then it continues, and you have magna manum Germanorum conductam renum transisse hanc ad fore biduo. Okay, so this is sort of the warning that he gives out. So he says, again, it's sort of like he says that a magna manum, a great band of Germans, had crossed, transisse, had crossed the Rhine, having been hired or kind of let out, right? So they're bringing reinforcements from Germany, right? And that hanc, this band, right, it's referring back to manum, this group would be present. So ad fore there is really ad futurum esse. It's another version of it. So he's saying that it would be present biduo, in 2 days. So again, it's interesting to note that Ambiorix references the Germans here. They're always sort of the boogeyman, right? And we'll talk about this at the end of the video, but we've seen the Germans referenced by Caesar throughout the De Bello Gallico narrative. Remember back in book 1 when he first opens talking about the Helvetii, the Germans are the scary ones. So he's trying to trick them by saying there's a group of Germans coming across the Rhine. That's a really tough spot to be in, and it would have gotten everyone's attention, right? He says they're going to attack in 2 days, and you're going to see how he kind of lures them into a trap with this. Then you have ipsorum esse concilium velintne priusquam finitimi sentiant, eductos ex hibernis milites aut ad Ciceronem aut ad Labienum deducere, quorum alter milia passuum cerciter quinquaginta alter Paulo amplius ab eis absit. Okay, so we have this sort of long line to keep going. So again, he said that this was the plan, right? Concilium of them, right? So in other words, this was their plan. Now, what he means by that is kind of interesting. The ipsorum is referring back to the Romans. So he's really saying it was the plan of the Romans themselves is kind of what he's saying, right? So in other words, he's saying the ball's in your court. So it was the plan of themselves, meaning the Romans, whether they were willing, right, sooner than in other words, willing to leave, sooner than the neighbors, the finitimi, realized. Okay, so what is he saying to do? It's deducere, to lead out, right, to go out. So he's saying it's your plan, whether or not they want to go out earlier, sooner than the neighbors realize. And by that statement, he means before the Gauls find out that they've left, right? So he's warning you. He's saying, hey, the choice is yours, but he's just giving them a warning. Now, what are they leading out? Well, when you look at deducere, right, the choice whether to lead out, right, whether to go, it's talking about the milites eductos, right? So they're soldiers having been kind of led out from winter quarters, right? So he says it's your choice whether you want to go to Cicero, right, either to Cicero ad Ciceronem or to Labienus, right? So he's referencing two other forts here. And again, it's kind of interesting how Caesar does this because these are two other forts that clearly weren't going to be tricked, right, in this way is kind of how it all plays out. So he's kind of mentioning Cicero and Labienus as safe places. And that's the trick that Ambiorix is doing here. And now he continues by giving a little more information about the camps of Cicero and Labienus, right? So you have quorum there. So again, to backtrack, he's saying the choice is yours, right? It's your choice whether or not you want to do this, right? Kind of making them feel empowered, like I'm just giving a suggestion. So he says the camp of to Cicero or to Labienus, of whom, meaning of those two, one, alter, right? One, and you have to go to opposite, right? Was away is kind of the idea. Was thousands of miles, right? Away. In other words, 1,000 paces. So he's saying the miles, right? The milia passuum is thousands of paces, right? Steps. And he's saying it's about 50. So about 50 miles away. So he says one of whom was about Kirkite 50 miles away. The other, right, is a little further, Paulo Amplius, right? The other one is a little further from them. So he's giving them the choice on whether or not they want to leave. And he's saying, hey, you could go to Cicero's camp or you could go to Labienus's, right? He says one of them is about 50 miles away and the other one is a little bit further. So now we get to the last part, right? And this is really where the master trickery of Ambiorix comes in. He just gave him an option. He says, the Germans are coming. You should probably leave, right? Then you have illud se policeri et iure iurando conformare tutum iter per fines daturum. And it's really daturum esse, right? Then you have quod cum faciat et civitati se consulere quod hibernis levetur et Caesari pro eos meritis gratiam referre. And then you end with hoc oratione habitat discadet Ambiorix. Okay, so at the very beginning, right, it's saying he said that. It's just continuing the giant indirect statement, right? It said that he promised this. So say is the he part, right? He promised this. And he confirmed, right, this by sworn oath, right? Iure iurando, we've seen before in Caesar, it's talking about like a sworn oath is kind of one way to do it. But it's really two words together, right? Iure and iurando, so swearing or vowing a vow is kind of what it means. It's the ablative of means here, right? So usually you can take ius iurandum to mean like a sworn oath, okay? So it's saying he confirmed this by sworn oath, meaning I swear and I promise that this is true, that he was daturum esse, he was going to give, right? There's your future, he would give, you could even say, iter tutum, safe passage or a safe journey through the borders. So in other words, he's saying, because of how much I love Caesar, you can take my promise, right? My sworn oath, because I'm your friend, all these lies he's saying, right? And I swear it, I'll let you go safely. And obviously the Romans are going to be ambushed if they do this, okay? So here he continues, and again, the quote there is really this is kind of a way to translate it, right? You want to kind of translate the relative as a demonstrative here as you're going through. So it's saying, since he does this, right? Cum faciat quote. So since he since he does this, and that means trying to get the troops out and trying to get them to leave the fort, right? If that kind of makes sense, it's the direct object really here, facia, right? He said that he was consulting, right, consulere, for the state, meaning for his own people. So then you have this, right? So he's consulting for the state, quod hibernis levetur. That means because it was being sort of relieved or lightened. It's talking about the state from winter quarters. So what he's saying here is that Caesar had basically told them that they don't have to supply the Romans with grain for the winter, right? That's kind of the idea, right? So in other words, he's saying, or not that Caesar told him, he says by leaving, he's helping both people. So he's trying to tell them that if he leaves, or if he gets the Romans to leave, they don't have to give, his state rather doesn't have to give the Romans food for the winter. So that's part of how he's kind of acting as an agent. He's like, this is good for my own state. And, right, for Caesar, right, Caesari, right? So in other words, he's also, so he's consulting for his state because he gets him to leave, and he said that he would, brought back or gave back gratiam, thanks to Caesar on account of his meritis, right, his service, meaning the good things that he's done. And remember, meritis there means like the deserved things, right? Sort of merited actions or things he's done that's good, right? His service or merits, right? That's what he's saying, okay? So he's saying he's kind of killing two birds with one stone, and he's helping on both sides. Then you finally get the end of this, and the end of the whole indirect statement, right? When you have hac oratione habitat discedit Ambiorix, okay? So it says, and so Ambiorix departed, right, disceded. So he departed with this speech having been held, having been done, right, is kind of the idea. And we can all kind of breathe easy a little bit as you work your way through this giant indirect statement. It is a little tricky to figure out, but it basically means this is the end and Ambiorix was done with his speech. So again, he's tricking the Romans here and trying to say, you should leave, right? This is the whole point. He delivers this crazy speech, but the indirect statement part is interesting because Caesar wasn't there. He's reporting what he heard that the speech was, okay? So a couple things to think about. Again, you have Ambiorix right in this section talking about owing Caesar stuff. So again, he's saying like, man, on account of all the beneficis Caesaris, right? Caesar was so nice to me. It's just interesting because remember, Caesar is putting these words in his mouth. He's lying to Sabinus, right? We know this, but Caesar still makes sure that we know that Sabinus is the one being deceived. I think that's what he's doing here by repeatedly naming him, right? And calling him Titurius, same thing. But it's just a way of reminding everyone like, hey, I wasn't deceived. This idiot was, right? Sabinus. So it is a way of outing him and deflecting the blame. And especially because Caesar is creating this speech for Ambiorix, he can say whatever he wants, right? Who knows what Ambiorix rather actually said. Like I said before, there's a reference to the Germans in here, which is interesting. They are always sort of the boogeyman in the Roman mind. So it's actually a pretty clever trick to mention them as coming. That definitely would have, like I said, got the Romans' attention and caused them potentially to leave the fort if they're about to be attacked. Again, it's all a deception here. The other thing is Ambiorix is offering up those choices to help the Romans, okay? And both of them are probably bad, okay? So he's saying, oh, like, yeah, I guess the choice is up to you. You can stay and fight the Germans, which is not good, or you can leave and they're going to get ambushed on the way. But again, the way he words it, or the way Caesar has him worded, is interesting of saying, the choice is yours. It almost makes it seem like the Romans are in control of their fate, when in reality, Ambiorix has set the ambush for them, right? They're kind of dead either way. Okay, the references, like I said, to Cicero and Labienus are interesting because they feel different than the ones to Sabinus, right? They come off in a more positive way, like they're being used to bait Sabinus. Sabinus is still the one who's kind of too dumb to figure it out. Okay, and of course, at the end, we have to have Caesar praising himself through Ambiorix's words. He's saying, like, I'm serving everyone, my own state, but I also love Caesar on account of the meritis, right? He's saying, I'm giving thanks back to Caesar. So whenever he can, Caesar has to put that sort of note in there through Ambiorix of how great he is. Okay, so this is definitely one of the trickier sections we run into starting up Book 5, just because, like I said, you have all these indirect statements here, the reporting. But if you kind of stay at it and consider always that it is an indirect statement, you can take it a little bit at a time, and it just gets a little bit easier as you go. All right. If you have any questions at all on my translation or anything you want to explain more, I'm sure there's things you can ask, just put them in the comments below. I'm happy to help you. But otherwise, keep working through the entire chapter, right? I know we broke it into 2 videos, but work through the whole thing. And you're looking for a point when you can read through all of this and understand it without needing too much help or assistance. That's how you know you're ready to move on.